Booted and Spurred, from Commando Courageous, a Boer's Diary, by Roland William Schikkerling. On the afternoon of 4th of October 1899, booted and spurred, with a Mauser rifle and a shining belt stuffed with cartridges, I sat in a railway carriage at Braamfontein, Johannesburg, waiting to be carried to the Natal front. They were there to say farewell. My mother, sisters, and sweethearts, who laughed and sobbed in turn. There were also bearded and fierce-looking men from the jungles of Fordsburg, some arrayed in braver trappings than would have been theirs had these been purchased instead of commandeered. Some, accustomed only to the humblest apparel, were now resplendent, so that neighbour sometimes did not know neighbour, and there was a creaking of new leather, much friendly banter, and a deal of merriment, for the Boer went to war with confidence and optimism. I was 19 years old, of a quiet, almost sorrowful outside. Yet while music was going, I felt so much fire within that I imagined I would not take an affront from the angel Michael or the eternal devil. I was only a fair horseman, with a very confused idea of war, but I was a deadly and quick shot. This last accomplishment, however, meant very little, I knew, unless one also possessed nerve and stamina. 8 days later, on the 12th of October 1899, the day after our ultimatum expired, my horse stood pawing and foaming at the frontier. A small body of us was impatient to enter the territory of the Queen. Entering the enemy's territory at Botha's Pass, we descended into Natal through the mountains by a narrow, winding pathway, which in parts was only a shelf cut in the mountainside. The country, in every direction, was mountainous, and the prospect was strikingly beautiful. It was spring, and all sorts of green subtropical vegetation and flowers spread over the mountain slopes. At our approach, the border police, residing in rondavels on the upper Ingogo River, fled, leaving their table spread, the food unfinished, and cups of tea almost warm to the guests unbidden. The next day, the wagons transporting our impedimenta descended through the pass in a long file and camped near the police huts. Our vehicles presented a strange spectacle. Laundry wagons, grocers' wagons, butchers' carts, trolleys, and spiders, many of them bearing the names of the firms or persons from whom they had been commandeered. Irregularly alongside and between, on horseback and on foot, came the men, each one dressed for war, according to his own sweet fancy. The pass seemed preeminently adapted for defence, and a few resolute men would certainly have resisted our entry. It was difficult, indeed, to imagine that this motley band had engaged in so daring a project as a war against Britain. The next day we moved forward slowly, and on the 16th arrived at Newcastle, which the enemy had abandoned to us. We camped on the edge of the town, where we remained a few days. Our wagonette bore, in large letters on the hood, P.M. and Sons, grocers, and my fellow travellers at the moment were Piton, Meyberg, and another. The sight of the Republican flag waving above the government buildings, and on arrival later of a trainload of prisoners captured at Dundee on the 20th of October, convinced me that the war had commenced. I had never before seen a British soldier, but had read of his glory and had also seen the pictures by Caton Woodfull. How I was disillusioned by the appearance of these men. They were small, and some had the naked bully beef slapped in their pockets, so that the grease oozed through. They had neither, it seemed, the accent nor the gait of Christians. I saw none of the sullen haughtiness I had pictured, of men spared against their wills, or of that stern propriety and uncompromising dignity that, in the direst straits, the most forlorn situation, and even in the hour of death, almost vanquishes the victor. Add that the lieutenant of artillery who brought them told me that they had surrendered before he had even properly trained his guns on them. They had, it appeared, lost their way in the vicinity of Dundee. What subsequently happened, the battles, sieges, and fortunes of our triumphant days, has been chronicled so often that I hurry over these incidents in order to arrive at the darker days of our retreat. I would write especially of the guerrilla period, when we were quite cut off from the world.